July 11th. We're going to note that Commissioner Steiner is absent. All other commissioners are present. The first item of business is the order of business. I know there's been at least one addition to the agenda, and under tab 4, reports will now be item F instead of item E, and item E will be a development agreement with Wyoming Casing. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none, then would there be a motion to approve the order of business with the addition that I mentioned?
I'll move. Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. The motion carries. So then the second item is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss?
Mr. President, I'll move that we approve the items on the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
We have the motion and the second. Other discussion? I do have, I guess, a question or a comment regarding the Southwest Region Grant Program. I saw there was a request, or the request totaled just over $275,000, and I guess I haven't committed those numbers to memory, but that seemed unusually high to me from the past.
President Johnson, that is unusually high. We received several requests this year that were in excess of $50,000. We generally don't get that large of requests. This time we have 3 of them in excess of that amount. So that inflated the requested amount, and we don't have the revenue stream to support those larger requests.
Okay. Well, that just seemed unusual to me, so thank you for commenting on that. Is there any other discussion on the consent agenda items? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to the non-timetable agenda, which is tab 4. And the first item there has to do with the ET zoning, and we'll ask Mr. Corton to introduce that.
Mr. President, City Commission, the attached in your packets is the ordinance and the map for the extension of the extraterritorial zone per our recent annexations. There has been no substantive changes from the first reading, and staff is available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Corton. Are there any questions by commissioners? Since this is a proposed ordinance and would be the second reading, if there's anyone from the public that would like to comment, we'd invite you to make those comments now. Just step to the podium and state your name. We'll hear your comments. Anybody from the public? There's no one from the public, so the chair would listen to comments from other city staff or commissioners.
President
Jessel?
Johnson, I'd just like to make it known that since this extraterritorial area is, of course, by its very nature in Stark County, that we did present or make a presentation both to the Stark County Planning and Zoning Commission and to the Stark County Commission itself. So they're well aware of our intent and have agreed with our desire to extend the extraterritorial zoning as it is presented this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Other comments?
Mr. President, Mr. Kessel, you and I talked once about maybe informing people as we grow, landowners, letting them know that, if there has been a change in jurisdiction. We're still thinking about doing that?
At this point, Commissioner Jackson, at this point, we've not let individual landowners know about this change. For some of them, it means they're coming under the auspices of the city's extraterritorial zoning authority, but for others, it means they're no longer going to be under the auspices of the city extraterritorial zoning authority, because we had differences when we made that map. But we have not individually notified every landowner in that area.
just seems to me that that knowledge for a landowner might be useful as they're approached for development and all, thinking that perhaps they're in county jurisdiction and, or vice versa.
Other comments?
Mr. President, I'll move that we approve the second reading, final passage of ordinance 1418.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So the motion carries. Item B is another ordinance. This has to deal with crew camps, and Mr. Colling will introduce that to us.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. The proposed ordinance before you is a new section, a new article to our city zoning code. It would provide for a conditional use permit or special use permit to be issued for a crew camp facility, otherwise known as a man camp. The state legislature passed House Bill 1144 in the last session and did allow municipal governments and other local entities to have regulatory authority over crew camps or crew housing facilities. So this proposed ordinance attempts to implement that section of the newly passed state law. In basic terms, what the ordinance does is impose a permit fee for someone to operate a crew camp, as well as imposing some minimum design standards as far as accessing municipal services, water, sewer, and streets. Provides for the requirement that any facility operating a crew camp would be annexed to city limits, as well as providing for adequate emergency services and fire services and those sorts of things. This, if adopted, someone could come before the city and request a special use permit for a crew camp. That petition would go before the Planning and Zoning Board for recommendation, and then ultimately come before this commission for final decision. It would as well allow the commission to be able to revoke such a special use permit if the conditions as far as sanitation and those sorts of things were not followed by the owner or operator of the facility. Additionally, we did put a section in here regarding a reclamation bond. Someone who is wanting to operate a crew camp facility would have to post a reclamation bond with the city so that in the event the owner or operator abandoned the facility and left the city with some sort of eyesore or some sort of a problem with the property, we would be able to execute against that bond and clean up the property in order to restore it to its original condition. With that, I'd be available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. Comments by commissioners?
Can you walk me through the fee schedule that we are thinking about for this?
I can. We've had a number of discussions at the staff level about how much the city ought to charge for a crew camp. The way the state legislation is written, it says that the fee for a crew camp facility must be based upon the services that are provided. Assuming a crew camp comes in, it's going to connect to municipal water and sewer, at least under this ordinance, so they're going to pay a fee for that. And we would be able to assess a separate crew camp fee for the other general government services that the city provides, police and fire and street maintenance and those sorts of things. So what we have attempted to lay out in the ordinance for a fee is to base that fee based upon what an equivalent facility would pay in municipal property taxes. So we had city assessor's office go through and determine what the per room charge is, per room municipal tax charge is for hotel and motel facilities in Dickinson. Under the understanding that this crew camp is basically going to be replacing somebody staying in a hotel or motel in Dickinson. We calculate that fee and then take that times the number of rooms that the crew camp facility would operate, and that's how the fee would ultimately be established. As it's written in the ordinance, the per room or per person fee that would be charged by the city would ultimately be adopted within the city's fee schedule. So you'd have that up for approval every year. This just provides a basis for determining that that fee is set by, or in accordance with, the services that would be provided to the crew camp facility.
Okay.
Other comments?
Mr. President, are we aware of other crew camps that have been constructed with similar requirements anywhere? Are we aware of any?
This would be new legislation, right, that just happened this past session? So, I mean, if they were going to put a fee on it, I don't know if they'd had authority to do it prior to this session.
I think that's correct, and there have been other facilities that I'm aware of in North Dakota that have attempted to assess property taxes against a crew camp facility like this. And what the state legislation said is basically you can't do that. You can't assess these as real property, but allows for the imposition of a fee for the government services provided. So this would be something new that we'd be doing, at least in the state of North Dakota.
Okay, I would assume that even prior to the legislation, a municipality could have required municipal services, however.
Correct.
Has that been done? Are we aware? I know there's a camp in Williston that's, I don't know if it's within city limits or very close. Does it have municipal?
My understanding is that that camp is located within the county and not within city limits, and provides for its own sanitation and its own water supply.
We are aware of several facilities that do have waste services not provided by the city. So I'm not aware of others that have water provided and wastewater not. But again, this is a new area for us, so
I guess what I'm getting at, and I liked the way this is written, generally, but I'm wondering if we have a feel as to whether or not this will discourage construction of a crew camp within the city or ETZ. Do we have an opinion about that?
We've had, I think, 5 phone calls now from prospective owners of crew camps that would love to see a development here in Dickinson. The 2 that we have spoke with, well, the 2 that I have had contact with specifically want to be inside our city limits because of that infrastructure that we'd be providing them, those city services that we'd be providing them. And so I can't say, and Planner Corton has had discussions with some of the others, so he could identify those. But I believe, from my conversations, that, yeah, they desire to be inside our city limits.
I guess where I'm going is, done right and in the right location, I think we should be really open to a crew camp. It could go a long way toward addressing some of the rent issues in town and some of the other issues that we have. So maybe it becomes kind of a tightrope for us as a city. So I'm just trying to get a feel for that.
I think our intentions are to establish areas within and around the city of Dickinson that we feel are best served or most easily served by crew camps. We then make those areas known to the developers of such facilities and allow them to choose which one they think will fit their needs best. It is our intention that if we are providing city services, that land will be annexed into our community, or otherwise we wouldn't be providing such a service. So I agree with you, Commissioner Jackson, that they definitely serve a purpose, and when they do go away, we'll have land then that is developed and could be used for other purposes. So.
Mr. President, if I may, Mr. Jackson, in looking through some of the other ordinances and doing some research on crew camps, there's a lot of different kinds of crew camps that can be operated, and some of them have really good standards. They're the kind of things that the military uses for housing people and overseas. There can also be the other side, on the other end of the spectrum, where you've got basically trailers and, you know, very poor sanitation and bad standards. And I do think on the margins, an ordinance like this probably keeps a lot of crew camps out of city jurisdiction. And I think it's going to, the intent anyway, I think, is to encourage more of the higher-end crew camps, the ones that may meet better sanitation standards and development standards. And I do think it would probably have the effect of keeping out some of the lower-rent crew camps or the lower standard ones.
That's good.
Other comments? I have a couple of questions and comments. On, I guess, regarding placing into ordinance in a sense, the definition of the fee that we would charge, I kind of question the wisdom of doing that. If, for example, we could just say that it would I'd rather do that by resolution, you know, than do it by ordinance. Resolution, you can change that really in one meeting. Also, you know, when you say total municipal taxation, you know, if you look at our general revenues and our general expenses, general fund revenues, general fund expenses, property taxes only fund about 1/3 of the total city services. So in a sense, if you charge the crew camp fee an equivalent to property taxes, you're only covering 33 cents of the expenses that we could have there. So I'd like there to be maybe a little more open-mindedness there. And then, since this goes in the ETZ, and this is, I discussed this earlier with Mr. Kessel, that, you know, we could have a crew camp outside of city limits, but within our extraterritorial zoning, which then comes under our jurisdiction. Well, so the question is, if we collect this fee, should it be shared with the county? Well, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that it should, especially if it's outside of city limits, and if there's a law enforcement call, you're going to expect the sheriff to respond to that. If there's a fire call, you're going to expect the rural fire department to respond to those things first. So I think they should have some of the revenue. And I don't think the ordinance addresses that, but, you know, when you look at, say, a motel room in Dickinson, North Dakota, when they're paying property taxes, they're paying city property taxes, county property taxes, park and rec, and education. And so, you know, if you're going to have a level playing field, I think the crew camp should pay a fee that's also equivalent to what, in a sense, a room is paying in total. I'd rather that be out of the definition so we can further, I think we should have the ordinance, but I think there should be maybe a little more discussion and debate on the fee and whether or not we would share that with the county. Now, Mr. Kessel, unless you got new information, you told me the other day that the Century Code prohibits us from sharing with Parks and Rec and the school district. Is that still your understanding?
I based that, President Johnson, on a conversation that I had with Marcy Dickerson from the state, and we were talking about the method by which is explained in the current ordinance, and she pointed that out, that if there's not a service provided, such as a school or Park and Rec, then it's not listed in the ordinance or in the state law. She didn't think we could charge for that and then share that revenue.
If a member of the crew camp plays on a softball team, uses the community center, walks on a walking path, they're using Park and Rec facilities. So could we include the Park and Rec property tax assessment than doing the fee, because all those things are available to them. There's no distinction made, you know, to the users. And the user fees do not cover the total expense of the bill, for example, the West River Community Center. So, Mr. Coley.
Mr. President, I can say the bill that was passed by the legislature did refer to any taxing jurisdiction, so I think just on the language of the bill, you're correct that any taxing, we can share that fee with any taxing jurisdiction, which I think would include the county and the school district and the park district. The differentiation, I believe, is that it is expected that a crew camp is not going to be a user of a school district. That it's not a place that is designed for people to bring their families. It's not a hotel. It's something that is designed for a particular group of people that is not a user of the school district. The legislation doesn't directly address that question, though. It just states the fee is to be based upon the services provided.
So the question I guess I have is, can we eliminate the language there in section 39.13003 regarding the permit fees, kind of eliminate that last half and just replace it with language that either refers us to our resolution or refers us to the fee schedule, so we have more time to discuss these other issues?
We can certainly eliminate that language, and you know, the fee will ultimately have to be established based upon the services that are provided, but that it can be done in resolution and need not be done in ordinance.
Well, if you, again, you know, we've often said that this is kind of a rough approximation, but what we collect in property taxes is about equivalent to our law enforcement budget. And, you know, we're certainly going to provide law enforcement services, we're going to provide fire protection services, and and then we, in a sense, we provide engineering support, administrative support. And so when you look at the, like I said, the entire gamut, our total costs are roughly 3 times what our property taxes are. But, so, I mean, I'd like to see us strike that language out so we can have much more discussion between the commissioners and city staff here on that issue. And then, this is just a minor thing. Right below that, you've got a listing of 6 items. Item number 1 begins, provide all ordinary urban, and then has a comma. And I think you're missing a word, or if that should be urban services or what you intended, but. And then, I guess I had one other one. If you go to the revocation of permit section and you list items A through F, I'm assuming if they have a multi-year permit, and let's say it's $20,000 a year is our fee, if they have a 3-year permit, you're not intending to collect $60,000 up front, are you? Would it be $20,000 a year? Or you'd collect the whole thing up front?
President Johnson, we can do that either way.
Well, okay. If you collect it annually, I think we should list in that A through F things that failure to make timely payment of permit fee is cause for suspension. You know, if you're collecting it all up front, well, then that's one thing. But I would guess if they do a multi-year permit, the expectation is going to be that we pay each year whatever the fee amount is. That's all I have.
Mr. President, one other minor thing, probably a minor thing, excuse me, under prohibited activities, possession of alcohol shall not be permitted. Can we do that, and do we really think we can enforce that?
Well, incorporating it into ordinance and enforcing it are separate questions. We certainly have the regulatory authority to prohibit the possession of alcohol or use of alcohol on any facility. That's part of what local governments are empowered to do pursuant to the repeal of prohibition. Whether or not we can enforce it is a matter that the police department is probably better able to answer than I am, but I take your question.
Other comments or questions? This is a proposed ordinance. Is there anyone from the public that would wish to comment on this ordinance? If so, you can step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments.
Good afternoon. Rod Lamblum, Roosevelt Custer Regional Council. I had an opportunity to review this thing this morning, and I have a couple suggestions. Number one, you might want to consider requiring a fencing or buffering around the unit. The other one would be to make reference to the state building code as provided by Senate Bill 2361. The other thing that I want to throw out is, would you be looking at particular zoning districts for the special use permit? Or are you going to allow it in any district?
Mr. President, I can try to answer that, and Mr. Corton may have comments on this too. We have gone back and forth on that among city staff about whether we would identify specific districts, and ultimately for this ordinance, we decided not to do that, that any particular zoning district would be eligible to come in and apply for a special use permit for a crew camp. Ultimately, though, the determination of whether a crew camp would be allowed in any particular location would be based upon the merits of the particular property at issue and not in reference to the zoning district on which that is applied for. But that's certainly something that can be introduced into the ordinance, and Mr. Corton may comment on that as well.
Mr. President, City Commission, that has been a debate that we've had, and based upon the ordinance, I feel very comfortable the way that it's drafted. There are some things that I will suggest to Planning Commission on Wednesday. We have a hearing for it as well, and with that, I have some suggestions or some ideas for them to consider. With respect to Mr. Lamblum's comments, those are some of the ones that I had additioned for. An additional element under the minimum design standards should be something similar to any additional site or building design standards as the adopting body requires to minimize impacts such as setbacks, building design, landscaping, and screening. That is a standard requirement for compatibility that you normally have for special use permits. That should be applicable as well for this ordinance. So I would concur with that one. The state building code, absolutely. The nicer building, the nicer crew camps that we have seen meet the IVC and IFC standards. I think that we would want to require that just for safety purposes. Also, we will get a higher quality crew camp facility in. By requiring that, that will limit the potential of having particular vendors come in. But I think that that's a good requirement. We have building standards for residential, commercial, and industrial. Why wouldn't we have the same for crew camps? So I think that we would want to have a higher quality crew facility in compared to more or less anyone that could come through. And then the building zoning districts, based upon this, with the criteria that we do have, I was wondering if we should have that. My feel at this point would be if we designated specific areas outside in the ETZ, we may have premature speculation on the land for that. Because that land value may increase because of this. It may decrease as well, depending on your perception. So I think that leaving the landowners and the potential vendors for this to come and make it compatible with our standards is probably the best way to move forward. There are areas that make sense that we would factor in, that I would factor in as part of this, such as your transportation network, closeness to residential, your topographies, how you're going to have it designed, the makeup and the rest, and those will all be factors as part of our special use permit. So just because you have that option of anywhere, let's say in the city or in our ETZ, you still have to meet certain criteria. And ultimately, ultimately the city commission has that desire to put appropriate conditions, such as additional setbacks or berming. Those are very applicable ones. Fencing is an absolute must, I would concur with. Additional trees around that. You know, so there's various ways that we can make this work so that the appearance for the short-term basis would be one that would be acceptable or compatible with the surrounding land uses, but also on the long-term basis could be good for redevelopment or the reclamation of that project.
Thank you, Mr. Colling and Mr. Catan. Mr. Lamblum, does that answer your concerns?
It does. There's another item that I want to throw out. Also, there was reference to sharing revenues. It's within that House Bill 1144 that this section may, that the county or city imposing the fees may share revenues from the fees with other taxing districts. So it's already in the law. And then I guess maybe the final one would be, can that land that the man camp sits on still be taxed as raw land?
Mr. President, I think I can address that. My understanding we're still dealing with new legislation here, but that it would still be taxed as raw land, that you cannot, as a municipality, cannot tax crew camps as real property. They have to be, the real property is taxed as raw land, and the fee is intended to compensate for that, for not receiving the municipal real property taxes.
Okay, those are my, just some of my observations I'd like to pass on to you today.
I know you came into the room a little late, but did you hear the discussion we had on revenue sharing?
On the revenue sharing or on the discussion with the county and the school district?
Right.
And Park and Rec?
Were
Yes,
you
I
here
did.
for that
Yes, I
discussion? Okay,
And I just wanted to emphasize the
Yeah.
fact that you can share,
right.
and I think that you'll have to be able to tailor in what those expenses in the outside areas are going to be,
Yeah.
particularly Parks and Rec
And
and county.
I would assume that if we have any revenue sharing here, these fees, that would be dealt with in a separate agreement between the city and the other political subdivisions. That doesn't necessarily have to be written into the ordinance.
That's correct, Mr. President. We have the statutory authority to share revenue, and we'd probably have to deal with particulars of that on a case-by-case basis.
And, you know, after we, I would think somewhere between first reading and second reading, we really should take this ordinance to county commission meeting and discuss it with them, because I would assume they have the authority to do something similar, you know, when we get outside the ETZ. And I would encourage them to consider that, so that we necessarily don't have, you know, a crew camp that locates outside the ETZ just because the permit fee is cheaper. Mr. Kessel.
President Johnson, the city commission can, or excuse me, the county commission can actually permit a crew camp inside the ETZ as well. It is one piece of the legislation that I think we may request some changes to next session, but as it's currently written, if the city says no, the developer can approach the county, and the county could potentially permit that very same crew camp inside the extraterritorial zoning of the city.
So it looks like it would be a good idea to try to coordinate our actions here with the county, so that we're on the same page. That's why I think, you know, in between first reading and second reading, you really need to talk to the county.
Which also leads to the question, can the county also allow for a permit fee on their own, as well as if the city does? And does that create double jeopardy for the developer?
Well, Mr. President, Commissioners, I think these are difficult questions that unfortunately weren't answered in the legislation, and you know, as it was written, it dealt with the ability to permit crew camps within city jurisdictions or within county jurisdictions. but it didn't address at all the extraterritorial zone and who has authority within that extraterritorial zone. So I think that's something that, going forward, we'll probably need to coordinate with the county, as well as probably get some additional interpretation from either the Attorney General or some other entity for.
Also, having dealt with this with some other entities, another option for the fee could be based on a per-unit basis, too.
Thank you, Mr. Lamblum. Is there anybody else that wishes to comment on this crew camp proposed housing ordinance? Do you have an ordinance number on this, Mr. Colling?
This would be ordinance 1419.
Any other city officials or city commissioners wish to comment?
Mr. President?
Yes.
One area that I think is worth discussing would be, as part of this when I went through it, would be minimum lot sizes for it. Right now, we don't specify a minimum site or lot size for the crew camp facility. I think that's warranted for consideration. If you have it too small, then in essence, anybody could come through with a 12, 15, 20, or 30 unit crew camp facility, which you're opening up to potentially a lot of special use permits for you to discuss and ultimately make a decision upon. Also, the smaller number that you get, it would appear that that you probably are, it's probably not going to equate to quality development, because a higher quality development would need to have a significant number of units in order for them to make their revenue, in order for it to be in order for the venture to be productive or cost worthy. If you're just doing 20, 50 or something on acre and a half lot, that's probably not going to be economically feasible if you're going to extend, let's say you're outside your ETZ and you're going to extend urban services. You wouldn't be able to get back your money necessarily within a 3 to 5 year period, depending on the cost of extending those services. That's why probably a bigger facility for something like that is probably more cost effective. You'll probably get a better quality product. That's why I was opening it up for discussion for potentially we put 3 to 5 acre minimums or something of that nature to remove the potential of having lesser quality, because you're not going to make the money.
Thank you. Any reaction to that suggestion? Mr. Colling, was that something discussed during the, during the writing of this ordinance?
I don't recall whether we had discussed that or not. We may have, but I would concur with Mr. Corton. It's probably a good idea that we put something like that in the ordinance, and I can do that.
That would be something that,
Go ahead.
sorry, that could be addressed in the review of the special use permit.
With respect to your question, Commissioner Jackson, yes, absolutely, that could be reviewed as part of it. I'm just saying is that, a lot of times for developments, we have minimum lot size standards or development standards, because we know that below that, you're going to have a product that doesn't meet either the community's vision or intention of that. That may be the case for here as well. I'm thinking, and it may just be specifically, if we're talking about extended urban services in the ETZ, since the cost of that will be pretty expensive, and you're talking about adding sewer and water and upgrading roads to urban standards, that maybe a minimum lot size standard would be necessary for that. Inside the city, you already have urban services potentially adjacent to the site, so you could have a smaller development, and it still would be cost effective for you to have a quality product.
A related question, will we be requiring a subdivision plat for a crew camp, and do we have the means to do that now, outside of this ordinance?
With respect to your question, Mr. Jackson, it depends on what they're doing. If the acreage is 80 acres and all they're doing is, and the ownership still stays the same, it wouldn't require replatting for that, because the ownership would still be the same. You're not transferring ownership. Most of the time, they would probably require replat, because the bigger companies, Target Logistics and other ones, they like to have ownership of it. So I would say probably the majority of the time it would involve a replat as part of the special use permit. It all just depends on the contract that they have.
Would it be a good idea to, there's been not major changes, but a number of changes suggested. Would it be a good idea to bring this back another time in, with the changes and use it as a report and public hearing and not act on it for second reading? I mean, are we under the gun here to get this on the books?
Mr. President, state law allows us to make whatever changes we need to between first reading and second reading. First reading gets this matter on your agenda, allows you to take a second reading and final passage for it. I think my recommendation would probably be to approve first reading on it, allow us to make the changes you've indicated, and we can either bring that back to you as a report or on for second reading and final passage, and you can consider whether the ordinance is appropriate to your desires at that time.
Well, like our next meeting is 1 week from now. I wouldn't expect us to act on second reading just a week from now. And especially, I think, you need to take time and sit down with the county on this. But a week from now, it'd sure be good to look at this with the changes that have been discussed here, and give and plus the commission will have had a week to kind of mull this discussion over and see what other reaction they may have to it.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Frenzel.
I'd like to see it come back as a report at the next meeting, and then the final reading and second reading and final passage at some future date. I mean, something that, it may take 2 meetings where we just have a report, but I'd like to see it come back in report format next.
Well, Mr. President, we can certainly make the changes that you've indicated here and have that back next Monday for a report, and have you take a look at it at that time.
I have no problem with us acting on first reading here tonight, but I wouldn't want us to be acting on, I wouldn't be in favor of us acting on second reading just a week from now. Any reaction from this end of the table?
I agree.
No, I concur with that, too.
Mr. Mayor, I move the first reading of the ordinance.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Ullman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. We have a 5:15 timetable agenda item. This is to hear a report regarding the Dickinson State University Energy Impact Discussion. Mr. Kessel, is there anything else you would like to add to that?
Ms. Joanne Beckman and John Herleman are here today to talk about an ongoing collaborative venture that they have with Great Plains Energy and Minot State University. They've been working to bring information and education to the public regarding oil impacts and energy impacts in our western North Dakota. So there's a upcoming symposium that they would like to discuss, and they're making preparations for that as we speak.
Okay, well, we'd welcome you to the podium, Ms. Beckman and Mr. Herleman, and
Thank
welcome.
you very much. We know your agenda is very busy, and we do appreciate the fact that Sean joined us for a discussion last Tuesday, and so he provided a great deal of information that was very helpful, and then sent some supplementary information, so we sure appreciate that, Sean. What we are doing is we are conducting meetings in all 18 oil, gas, and coal counties in central and western North Dakota, And actually, tomorrow we'll be down in Slope County, and that is the last county for us to visit. And so what we've been doing is just trying to hear firsthand accounts from city officials, from the general public, about what they have experienced as impacts of the energy development of recent years, and we're using that information then to frame our agenda for the symposium that we're holding here at Dickinson State, September 18th through the 20th. And so, in the interest of time, what I would like to do is give you a survey, each of you a survey. Oh, okay. And John will hand those out. And if you would be so kind as to fill that out and return it, the kinds of things that you're hearing from your constituents would be just very helpful for us. The general areas of our symposium in September are environmental, workforce, emergency preparedness, and response. And so we're not limiting our discussions as we've been out and about to those topics, because we really do want to hear about other issues. We are hopeful that we'll be able to continue our efforts into a third year, and we would address those other issues in the third year symposium. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I will thank you for the time and look forward to receiving your surveys.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Beckman. Any comments or questions here by commissioners? In general, with the, I guess, hearings or meetings you've been conducting, are you hearing kind of a common theme throughout now?
You know what, we were actually just talking about that outside. Yes, we are hearing, of course, the obvious things, roads, housing are huge issues, you know, throughout the whole area that's impacted. But we also are hearing things from law enforcement, you know, about the increased number of calls. We're hearing things from social services about increased caseload, and the court system, of course, because of increased law enforcement calls. We are also hearing, it was interesting, in every meeting, we've had something kind of unique brought out. And so one of the things that came up at one of the meetings from the public health nurse was the fact that people are moving into properties that really aren't, or shouldn't be, maybe, inhabited. And so there are some issues related to that. And so that's one of the things we've heard. We will be doing a report, by the way, of summary of our meetings and of the surveys that we get returned, and we'll make sure that you get a copy, or you could each get a copy if you'd like. John?
Thank you. I think a couple other areas that we've heard about is from the amount, we're hearing more and more that for our law enforcement, for our hospital workers, our city workers, the amount of stress that they are coming under because of the increased demands placed on them, and not having enough manpower to meet some of those demands. We're hearing huge increases in Williston, for example. Their calls to the police department are up to 18,000 calls already for this year, which is just, overwhelming them. We're also hearing from the sheriff's departments in a lot of the different counties that up to 40% of the people that they're pulling over for whatever reason are actually wanted somewhere on felony violations. So they're starting to see more and more of those types of issues popping up. The other one we're really trying to work on is the emergency response and preparedness. If everything goes what we're trying to do, we'll actually have some representatives from Lloyd's of London here to talk to us on what they call sort of a peace insurance that oil companies will work with us on, work with cities on, to look for environmental issues and things like that. So I think it's going to be a very good symposium that can help not only working with the oil companies and some of the things that we know they want in place from us after being down south and following up with Katrina's incident, as well as the oil spill down in the Gulf. So I think there's ways that we can really bring some good things to help everyone at this next symposium.
Thank you. Ed?
Mr. President, if you recall, prior to me starting, I attended the Minot, and I wanted to commend you on it. I thought it was an excellent conference. It was very informative for me coming to hear from out of state and understanding the impacts and understanding the whole the whole process of that, and I think you did a very, very good job. You should be commended on that.
And I was remiss in not acknowledging that Sean was actually on a panel for us last year at the Dickinson State, and Mayor, we appreciated you being at part of that symposium as well.
One quick question, is this survey available on your website to fill? I see we can email it, but is it available?
Actually, they were working, there was a little glitch, and so they were working on that to get it on the website and have it be fillable and just returnable, yes. The gal who's working on that is out, she was out today, so I don't know for sure if they accomplished that on Friday or not, because I was out of the office. But our website is www.dickinsonstate.edu/energy, and if she did get that on, it would be on that webpage.
Okay.
Anything else here? All right. Well, thank you for being here.
Thanks very much.
We have a 5:25 timetable agenda, and I think we'll move to that. It's close enough to 5:25. Mr. Catan, are you going to introduce this one?
Yes, I will, Mr. President. Commissioners, this is a petition request to allow construction of multifamily housing on Lot 13, Block 29, States Edition. A special use permit is necessary to be granted prior to issuance of any building permits, as this is a commercial zoning district. The LC, or limited commercial zoning district, is an exception to other commercial districts, as it does allow residential uses in that district, approved by a special use permit. The site is located off of 1st Street West and is easterly of 23rd Street Avenue West. The Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval. Mr. President?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Catan. You've heard his report. Any comments or questions by the commission? If there's no comments, would there be a motion regarding this request?
I'll move that we approve the special use permit.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Other discussion? Were there any special restrictions or conditions put on this one, Mr. Catan? By planning
Not
and
on-
zoning?
Mr. President, not in this particular one. This application, when it was originally submitted, it was found out that they needed to get a variance in order to further subdivide it in the future, as normally happens as part of townhouses, and they received their variance in June for that.
Okay. Any other discussion? If there's no other discussion, we will vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. We'll go back to tab 4 and item C, oil impact staffing response. Mr. Kessel?
Thank you, President Johnson, Commissioners. This is a document that you've seen at the last commission meeting. It is slightly revised since that time. The first few pages where we discuss in the executive summary our difficulty in hiring staff, especially those staff that have a skill set that is comparable to those that are required or needed in the oil field. Most of the time, that is, it affects our entry-level staff, our laborers, our operators, and our senior operators the most. We're finding that in our Public Works Department, especially, this impact is being felt. The average applicants per position are going down, the average score per applicant is going down, and the amount of times that we're hiring is going up. So we're concerned about that trend, and so what you have before you is a proposal that will hopefully address those very issues and allow us to to attract a workforce and attract applicants that will provide good quality services to our community. It does have 3 different components to it. The first component is a cost of living adjustment. That cost of living adjustment would be applied to all staff across the board who are full-time or permanent part-time in nature. We are requesting a 3% increase. That is based upon some data that we found from Williston and Minot, our sister oil hub cities, that indicate that cost of living in Dickinson is actually higher here than it is in each of those communities, mostly because of housing. I found that a little surprising myself, but according to the Sperling's website, that is their information that is currently out there. The next item is some new positions. What we're finding is that in our solid waste department, we have several new accounts that are being added on a regular basis, both on a residential side and a commercial side. And depending on the type of account, it affects our staff's ability to respond in a different way. A residential account is fairly easy. We have the same size bins that can go out. But on a commercial side, we could have dumpsters that vary from 1 yard to 8 yards. And it fills the trucks up much quicker. You can't add as many stops, and so the response is, we believe, requires another person to respond adequately to those service needs. On the street maintenance side, we are also requesting a staff member in that department. We are adding streets all the time to our network. Engineer Soren has gone through some comparative data with other cities and found that our staff to miles ratio is quite high when you compare us to other communities. The next staff member that we'd like to see is an appraiser. That is a different addition since the last time you saw this. Of course, every building permit that we issue means that once constructed, our assessing office has to go out and add that to our tax rolls. Our building permits have doubled from 2009 to 2010. From 2010 to this year, we're slightly behind last year's schedule, but there is a backlog of permits that have yet to be processed. I'm pretty confident that we are running about the same as where we were last year. Also, we are seeing the ratio of commercial projects that we're permitting is higher with respect to a comparison to residential. We actually issued the most commercial building permits of any other city in North Dakota last year, more than Fargo, more than Grand Forks, Bismarck, Williston. And the type of projects are just becoming more and more complicated. So we are requesting a appraiser to assist in our assessing staff as well. The solid waste department would be financed differently than the other 3 positions that I mentioned. Solid waste, we can finance that through fees that we are collecting because of the increase. The remaining, what we're suggesting is a new revenue stream, or a revenue stream that will be enhanced. The City of Dickinson, the state legislature created a revenue stream for cities in oil-impacted areas that allows a $500,000 to be remitted to that city once their total employment in the mining industry exceeds 2% of total employment. We've exceeded that standard for a few years and have been receiving that $500,000. There's a second level of funding that allows cities to receive another $500,000 if you have 7.5% of your total jobs in the mining industry. I was just informed today that we have 9%, 9.2% actually, of jobs in Dickinson are related to the mining industry. So we are eligible then for that additional $500,000, bringing total funding to $1 million. That funding would be available to us in September. It takes a little while for collections to occur, so we would expected that check would actually arrive in September. Now, due to the way that the state law is written, we may be eligible for that same $500,000 in fiscal year 2011, since we've made that threshold, we've crossed that permitted threshold in this year. So what that means is we potentially could receive $500,000 in July or early August, and then in September, we would receive $1 million based on, again, reaching that 7.5%. So the funding stream is there. It appears that it'll be there for a while since we've exceeded the 7.5 by almost 2%. Anecdotally, the city of Minot just received, crossed the 2% threshold for the first time, so they will also be receiving the $500,000. And I was a little surprised to find that the city of Williston has over 34% of their job base is in the mining industry. So we're well behind that standard. The last component then is a skill-based pay adjustment where we identified positions that are being that are very difficult for us to fill because of that skill set required in the oil field especially. Most of those skill sets are related to CDL positions, and there are a few that are outside of that, most specifically our communication specialists, dispatchers essentially. As you know, many of our oil service companies, especially the ones that run trucks like Missouri Basin, like Power Fuels, have dispatching services of their own. It has made it more difficult for us to fill positions within our communication specialist position, and is a direct attribute of the increase in wages and the marketplace that competition is out there. So what I'm proposing is that all of these three areas, cost of living increase, new positions, and skill-based pay, are all still within the additional funding stream of $500,000. My guess is right now we'd have about $350,000 in expenses if implemented as proposed, and that leaves a cushion then of another $150,000 if there are positions that are identified later or things change, that we could use those funds as well. But it does mean the City Commission is putting staff first, and I think in today's environment, we need to do that. So I'd be open to any questions that you may have.
Why don't we hold the questions for a few minutes? We have a 5:35 timetable agenda item, and we actually have two timetable agenda items, so we'll have to kind of work around those items. So we'll go back then to tab 3, and we have a public hearing, and Mr. Curtan, I think you're going to introduce that also.
Mr. President, City Commission, this is a petition request to rezone from R2 to R3. The site is located at the southwest corner of Museum and Sims. Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval. The use is proposed to be housekeeping apartments due to the housing shortage that we have in the city. That's their intention, to build housekeeping apartments, but I also want the board to be aware of that granting a rezoning request does not guarantee that that particular use will be used in the future as well. Mr. President?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Catan. This is a public hearing, so we'll declare the public hearing open. Anybody that wishes to comment on this matter may do so. Just step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. Anyone from the public wish to comment? We'll declare the public hearing closed, and we'll invite comments then by city commissioners or other city staff.
Mr. President,
Mr. Jackson.
just a question, and I don't remember if it was discussed at Planning and Zoning. We're leaving the hotel with enough parking by doing this?
With respect to your question, Commissioner Jackson, that's something to be yet determined. I have mentioned it to the applicant, and they will need to provide, in order for them to proceed forward with any kind of development, they're going to need to show the existing parking for the hotel and see if there's any area left over within the confines of these three lots, and if there are, then they have the ability to develop accordingly. I've told them my reservation with this. I have a feeling that even though that they may request from R2 to R3, that the actual development will be more consistent with our R2 zone, because they're going to be limited due to the parking spaces that are required for the existing use. So I have a feeling when all said and done, it'll be comparable to probably what the existing zoning is today.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Is this ordinance 1420, Mr. Coley?
That's correct, Mr. President.
Is there a motion regarding this proposed ordinance?
I'd make the motion for approval.
Okay, we have the motion to approve first reading. Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. We'll go back then to the oil impact staffing response, and Mr. Kessel just finished his introduction, so are there comments or questions by commissioners now regarding his request or his recommendation? Mr. Kessel, you said the cost of living adjustment, 3%, you said that would be for all city employees. Did you mean, for example, yourself and other senior staff members?
It would not include myself at all. We did have a discussion at the leadership team meeting, and it was proposed that they not be included in that.
So which positions are excluded now?
The executive team would be made up of the Public Works Director / city engineer, myself, the fire chief, police chief, and finance director.
Okay. Other questions?
When we discussed this last time, we talked about keeping the money that we're generating from the state a little more general than specific to this, so that we had other ways to react to oncoming expenses that we're going to be facing. How have you addressed that as you've moved forward with funding options?
We did, Commissioner Altman's, we did take out, based on the reaction of the city commission, the funding for the solid waste operator from this and moved it to fee-based. Our accounting of any oil revenues is to put it all into a singular fund. And that would include dollars from this revenue stream and any others, and then expense out from there. The nice thing about this funding is it's very flexible in its use. So if we chose to use it to buy additional equipment to increase our snow removal capacity needs, that is certainly something we can do. But the intent would be to put it into that oil account that we've created and then expense from there.
Okay. And I'm jumping ahead to your next item on the agenda, the money that we received for snow removal from the emergency services. Are we able to use any of that money to fund the street side of this, or how does that work?
Commissioner Altman's, again, yes, we could, but on the street side, that's a one-time funding source.
Right.
So if we chose to fund the street operator out of that funding source, there's no guarantees that we're going to have that funding again year after year. Where this funding stream is more likely to occur, at least for the foreseeable future, for quite a few years. And then the whole idea behind this response is that if the funding stream goes away, it generally will mean that we've received a significant change in our economy due to energy or oil impacts. So then this response could be retracted either in part or as a whole. Certainly the 3%, I would never suggest that a employee's pay goes down, but it may have to be held for a year or two.
Okay.
Other comments? I think on the snow removal funds, Commissioner Altman, the way I look at it is we were over budget on snow removal, which meant if nothing else happened, we would have to amend our budget and actually draw down our general fund by that amount. What this does is just makes our general fund whole. So we're, I don't know if the $177,000 covers all of our additional snow expense, but I would assume it covers a very good portion of it. And it just makes our general fund whole. And since it's a general fund, it's eligible to be used in most any way. One of our actions that we'll have to take if we agree to Mr. Kessel's proposal here, we would probably have to make an allocation then out of the oil impact fund to the general fund to cover a portion or all of these expenses. And he said that that's roughly $350,000. But again, having an oil impact fund gives the city and the commission a good way of tracking how we spend our oil impact monies, and also gives us a good way to report back to the legislature or any other state agency. And I think from time to time, they're going to ask cities like Williston, Minot, and Dickinson, how are you spending the money? And we'll have a very good paper trail to show them how that's being done, and that it's being spent appropriately on impacts related to energy development. So I think it's good that we're doing this kind of early in the game right now. So, well, I think there's time to act on this. Personally, if the additional $500,000 is a sure thing, I don't have any objections to accepting these proposals and agreeing to them myself.
I would agree.
You agree?
I do too.
I would concur.
So Mr. Colling, would a motion to accept the oil impact recommendations made by the city administrator, would that be sufficient, do you believe?
I believe that would be sufficient.
And we can deal with the budget amendments at a later date.
Correct.
As this is all sorted out. But okay, would there be a motion then to that effect?
So moved.
Mr. Frenzel moves that motion. Is there a
I'll second it.
And we have the second. Any other discussion?
Mr. President, the only thing I'd add by way of discussion is that this probably isn't over. Our review of this whole situation, I expect, is going to have to be ongoing. We've talked about the fact that when the day comes, there will be some of these wages pulled back when that's appropriate. But that's a ways out, and I think we're going to have to keep analyzing this regularly.
I agree, and and you made some comments a few meetings back about essentially not getting caught up in kind of the euphoria, and I think those are good comments and a good caution, but also at the same time, we have to be realistic to what seems to be happening to our community and our region, and it certainly feels to me, and I suspect it does to the rest of you, that the impact is growing in intensity rather than, like reaching a plateau or cutting back. It feels to me like we're still experiencing quite a bit of development. Do you agree, disagree?
Definitely.
So I think this is a good measured step.
I just want to thank the commission for,
We haven't voted on it yet.
well, anticipating a positive vote based on the comments received. Oftentimes we hear from other oil communities, and the thing that I hear the most is, don't let it get away from you. make sure you do enough proactive measures so that it doesn't get away from you. And I think this will help that very instance, so that it doesn't get away from us.
Well, and I will make a comment too, Sean. I want to commend the executive team for foregoing the cost of living raise and passing it on to all of the other employees, and it's definitely commendable on your guys' part too.
Okay, any other discussion? We have the motion and the second. We'll vote then. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Ullman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. That brings us to our 5:45 timetable agenda item, and Mr. Soren, finally, you have something to introduce.
I get the mic again. Thank you, President Johnson and Commissioners. We do have a utility easement vacation. It's located in Lutz's First Edition between lots 1 and 2 of Block 2. This is easement request because of combining the south portions of Lot 1 with a portion of Lot 2 to construct a hotel at this location, and they're needing the easement to be vacated in order to do that. As part of the vacation, they've agreed to add an easement for MDU along the north boundary of the new property, the new defined property that they own, and have acquired all the signatures from all the utility companies, and we are recommending approval of the vacation.
And this is a public hearing, so we'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to comment on this matter may do so at this time. Step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. Anybody wish to comment? There's no one that wishes to comment, so we declare the public hearing closed, and I certainly invite comments by other city staff or commissioners. Hearing none, this is a resolution. It's resolution number
Resolution 37-2011.
37-2011. Do we have the resolution?
There's not a documented resolution in there, but it would be Resolution 37 in your books.
Well, we don't have one. How can we act on it if we don't have it?
What you pass is the resolution approving the vacation, and that is put into the resolution form, which is in the resolution book.
Okay. We can do that?
You can.
All right.
I'll move to approve Resolution 37, 2011.
I'll second.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Frenzel?
I'll need to abstain from this vote.
Okay, you have a conflict here?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Any other, we have the motion and the second, any other discussion then? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel abstains, chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Okay, we're back to the non-timetable agenda. Item 4D is the Elks Building update. Mr. Kessel, you're going to introduce this matter.
Thank you, President Johnson, Commission. The next item refers to the Elks Building, and at our last City Commission meeting, we received a request from Mr. Granville Beaver Brinkman to extend the his most current extension another 45 days. He has a business partner that he would like to add, and had requested that time to present us with a business plan that would involve that business partner. The extension is currently ended as of June. Mr. Greenwood, who is the attorney we've hired to advise us on this matter due to the conflict that Epeltoft Sickler has advised us to issue a 90-day notice of default. If it is our intention to move forward with a new owner of that building, that's, Mr. Greenwood has advised us to do that 90-day default letter. What it does is it does allow the 45 days being requested by Mr. Brinkman to continue to submit his business plan if he so desires. The City Commission can consider that, do our due diligence upon receipt, and you can rescind this 90-day notice of default if you so choose. So essentially, you are kind of granting the extension, although by default, since you have that ability to rescind.
Mr. Kessel, even if Mr. Brinkman hadn't requested 45 days, we have to go through the same process anyway. There would be that 90-day period in there.
That's exactly correct, President
Right,
Johnson.
okay. Okay, you've heard Mr. Kessel's introduction. Comments, questions by commissioners?
So essentially, we have our Plan A and our Plan B. If what Brinkman has presented comes to fruition and the new owner is acceptable and things wrap up and life is good, and if it doesn't and it doesn't happen within the time frame, then we would move forward with us taking it over anyways.
Right, Commissioner Altman, that's essentially correct. You issued the notice. If everything is kosher with the business plan as presented, you rescind that notice then before the 90-day period ends. If we're not happy with the business plan as presented, we simply allow that 90 days to proceed, and then we take action from there.
At any point, we just want to see resolution to this matter anyway, so this will push it to one way or the other. Okay.
Other comments or questions? Well, what you really need then is a motion to issue the notice of default.
That's correct, President Johnson.
I would make that motion.
We have the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion. Just point of clarification, I believe in your conversations with Mr. Greenwood, it's his opinion that we, as a commission, do have the right to approve or disapprove of a sale of his interest to someone else.
Correct, President Johnson. I did ask that question of Attorney Greenwood, do we have the authority to reject or agree to any business partners that may be taken on the Historic Elk project? And Mr. Greenwood's advice was, yes, we do. So hence the thought process behind issuing, rescinding this notice if we're happy with them and allowing it to proceed if we're not.
Okay. So, in my view, then, he has to bring, if he's going to transfer his interest to another entity, that other entity, in our view, has to be credible. And if we deem them to not be credible, we do not have to approve the transfer.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. Any other discussion here? Then we'll vote on the motion. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So the motion carries, and you're hereby authorized to issue this notice of default.
Thank you.
We'll go to item 4E then. That's the development agreement regarding Wyoming casing. And Mr. Colling, I'm assuming you're going to introduce that to us.
Yes, Mr. President, Commissioners, the proposed development agreement before you is a development agreement for Wyoming Casing. They are developing new property on the north side of town, currently outside of the city limits, but adjacent to the area that was recently annexed up on the north side. As I understand it, they have requested municipal services, water and sewer and such, and accordingly are requesting annexation to city limits along with the development of their project. Memory serves, the plat has gone through planning and zoning and will be before this commission before too long. There's been some discussion with the landowner and with adjoining landowners about how much land area will be annexed in along with this. But what this development agreement does is commit the landowner, Wyoming Casing, to annexation into city limits, along with the standard provisions we have had for other annexations of requiring some security for the development of infrastructure and other provisions within that agreement. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Colleen. You've heard his introduction, comments, questions? It's rather straightforward. So you're just looking for the commission to either act by approving or disapproving this agreement?
Yes, Mr. President, that's correct.
Okay, would there be a motion to either one of those?
Move the approval of the agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Discussion. There's no discussion. We'll vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Brings us to item F, reports. Mr. Kessel, we'll let you begin.
Well, my thunder has been stolen on the next item. That item is the North Dakota Department of Emergency Services snow removal grant. Again, this legislative session, the state allowed cities who had extraordinary expenses related to snow removal to apply for grant funding from the state legislature, or from the state. We did so, and we received $177,000 in grant funds from the state. So we were very excited, of course, to receive those dollars and apply them, as was stated earlier, to our general fund. If you'd like me to continue, the next item is the KLJ.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
President, can you put that in perspective of where we were with respect to budget? What does that do?
In terms of total expenses, I would refer, I guess, that question to Finance Director Johnson. She put the grant together and has a better idea of how much we requested.
Good evening, President, Commissioners. I don't have exact totals on where we would have been over budget. I know it was in the six-figure range. What we requested was close to, or what we sent in for expenses was roughly $400,000, I believe. But that had, most of that was equipment running costs, which would have been at $90 an hour. So it would have been over and above the actual expenses that we paid. So I believe it was, I would say we were over probably $125,000 for last year.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before Mr. Kessel goes on to the second item? Okay, Mr. Kessel.
Next item then is KLJ Government Liaison Activity Report. You have copies of the last two reports that have been submitted. It's just a synopsis to show you the type of activities that they are working on. And if you have any questions about that report or any of those items, I would certainly try to answer them as we speak. They have been it's been a nice referral for me to use this group or this entity on some of these items. They certainly have expertise to assist us move them forward. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the next item, which is compensable factors. You have within your agenda packet a document, a compensable factors document. This document was generated internally to replace Fox Lawson. Fox Lawson was a company that was hired by the city of Dickinson many years ago to develop a compensation system. They came in and reviewed job descriptions and put those job descriptions in a grade format for us. Since that time, we have, over the period of years, have lost the expertise that is associated with Fox Lawson, and it's become very difficult for current staff to apply the measures by which Fox Lawson is based. And it's because of that, this compensable factor system was created. I'm happy to say that the Human Resources Committee, a committee made up of city employees, has reviewed this document and tested it, and they find that it is easy to use, it's easy to apply, it's replicable, and it's consistent. And what we'd like to do is replace the Fox Lawson standard with this standard, so that all new job descriptions, any reclassifications would be using this system instead of Fox Lawson. It's not mentioned in ordinance. Fox Lawson isn't, so I don't believe we have to do any ordinance changes. But Attorney Colling, I believe a motion is in order, if you so choose, at the next commission meeting to actually adopt this kind of a system. Civil Service, by the way, has approved this system as well and is making a recommendation for the City Commission to approve the document. So if there's any questions, I'd love to take those on.
I don't have any questions. I just make a comment that, the Fox Lawson study or Fox Lawson firm was retained prior to 2000, but shortly before that. And I remember one of the first things I had to deal with as mayor was trying to explain Fox Lawson to our own city employees, and the terminology was very difficult. And really, the Fox Lawson recommendations were not implemented 100%. I know in that first year as mayor, we ended up modifying some of their recommendations. So while it's generally been followed, it was not exactly followed in terms of their recommendations. And so
I appreciate those comments, President Johnson. That's exactly the experience that I have heard occurred once it was adopted. I should mention that upon adopting this document, assuming that the City Commission would do so, we would go through a revision of the current job descriptions so that they can all be scored using this system. The current intent is to hire some additional staff via contract, maybe some interns through the SBDC, to assist leadership team and staff with going through that job description review. So we could see some job descriptions changing grades as a result of this change.
Well, and in light of the impact that employees have had on their individual jobs, I think that's important to really assess what is their workload, what's their stress level, where are they at, and reevaluate that.
Thank you. I'll take any comments if there's any further, or of course, later on. That would conclude my report for now.
Okay, and I think item 4, the North Side annexation settlement, Mr. Colling, you're going to comment on that.
Yes, Mr. President, Commissioners, this relates obviously to the ongoing lawsuit over the annexation on the north side of town. Just wanted to bring you up to date on developments in that case. We did have a scheduling conference with the judge overseeing the case earlier today, and the judge did set a trial date for November of this year. We don't think ultimately that is going to be necessary. We have been in settlement discussions with the landowners and believe that we have reached settlement in principle with the landowners in which the city would make some concessions to them on development of infrastructure and those sorts of things, and in exchange for which the landowners would dismiss their lawsuit, and we would be done with any pending actions regarding the annexation. As I say, we've got an agreement in principle. It has not been finalized, and it has not been signed by all the parties. So at this point, I don't want to go into a great amount of detail regarding that settlement, since we're still negotiating some of the details. But if there are any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
I'll just comment shortly after the courts ruled on the injunction request. I had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Colling and Mr. Kessel, and we discussed this matter, and it was my recommendation to them that they try to pursue a settlement with the parties, that further litigation was going to add additional costs. We have, as we well know, several impact issues that we're dealing with in this community, and we ultimately believe that, you know, the city would prevail, but, you know, there would be hard feelings. These are our neighbors and friends, and we said, look, let's try to reach a settlement. So I encourage them to go into negotiations, and it's been ongoing for quite some time, but from what I've heard, I think Mr. Coley and Mr. Kessel have reached out and done a good job here, and I hope we do have a settlement. Okay. Item 5 there, or point 5, I think, Mr. Kessel, that's yours.
It is, President Johnson, and it's just a quick one. I think it's important that the City Commission be aware that we currently receive our prosecution services for our municipal court system through the state's attorney's office at Stark County. The Stark County state's attorney has terminated our agreement per the agreement documents, and said that as of December, end of December this year, they'll no longer provide services. I have been in contact with Mr. Henning to talk about that. They are willing to provide services beyond 2011. They're just not willing to do so at the current funding levels. So he has requested an increase in the contract rate. The requested increase is double the current rate. The current rate, I believe, is $21,000, so it would double that to $42,000. We've not negotiated a lot since we're entering the budget season, and considering the new rate, or the new rate that's being offered, it might be in our best interest to see if there's any other attorneys out there who'd be willing to take on those services for a fee that is less than what's been proposed. So through the budget process, we'll certainly continue to keep you informed, and I'd love to hear any feedback or questions that you may have regarding this item.
Has that 21,000 been essentially a retainer?
Essentially, I suppose, Commissioner Jackson, we provide, it's a flat rate. We don't pay more or less every year. So they provide the services for that fee.
When was the last time it was increased or renegotiated?
Commissioner Oltmans, I'm not sure the exact date, but it has been a while. There's certainly, I don't think it's out of order for Mr. Henning to ask for an increase, because it has been quite some time, but I can't tell you an exact date at this time. I can find that out for you.
Okay.
That would conclude my reports then, if there's no other questions.
I do have a comment on this item. A year ago, when we went into the budget process, you know, there was some discussion about creating a full-time city attorney position. Right now, we outsource for those services, and the Ebeltoft-Sickler firm currently are providing those services to us. But, you know, when there was also a fee increase there a year ago that we negotiated with them. If Mr. Henning is firm on his $42,000, I think if you look at that $42,000 plus what our fees are with Ebeltoft-Sickler, where a year ago it probably wasn't cost justifiable with previous fees, I think with the fees where they're at today, it's, my guess is, without having studied this, is that this is probably cost justifiable to have a full-time city attorney as an employee. Now, no offense to you, Mr. Colling, you do a great job. This is strictly business. But, you know, if we wrote a job description where our full-time city attorney would handle the prosecution plus do all the other city attorney things and be, right here at City Hall on a full-time basis. I think that would probably be a pretty reasonable deal for the city. I mean, I think at least we have to take a hard look at it. And so it'd be my recommendation that Mr. Kessel do that. You probably, I can't remember if you had written up a job description last year when this was kind of being kicked around at budget time, but with some of the growth we've had and some anticipated growth, the legal issues aren't getting any less. I think we ought to look at this, and I'd certainly like to hear what my fellow commissioners think.
I would agree. Any analysis would have to include, I expect, the inevitability that a staff city attorney would still need help at times with certain issues. And I don't know how you quantify that, but we at least need to recognize that.
Mr. Frenzel or Mr. Altman, any comments from you?
I certainly think it should be researched. It appears from the money that's going out of the city currently for legal services, and if we combined all those things, we are in the ballpark for hiring one. But whether we can hire one that's as qualified as what we've got now, that would be questionable.
Well, I agree with you. He's eminently qualified, but
I guess I'd want to take a serious look at the job demands and the salary to make sure that we're not creating one more overloaded position, that it would be, appealing and have the structure, but that we're not trying to pile too much on the one position to do everything that we would want.
yeah, and that's an excellent point, because actually, if we went down this path, we would probably have to add another administrative person to the staff that has some specific legal support background. Could mean some restructuring of what we have today, but I think there would be too much workload where you just say this person has to do all their legal work and their administrative work also.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there are some more other costs involved and stuff, but since it is budget season, I think we ought to take a hard look at it.
President Johnson, Commissioners, there are other cities that do have that model out there. Bismarck, Minot, both do have a staff city attorney, so there's structures out there that we can at least review and model after and apply the good things that we see for our purposes. So I'll certainly make those calls and have a proposal prepared for you during the budget process.
Well, I guess I just look at Mr. Corton's position, for instance, and how much nicer the meetings have gotten having a full-time person that's dedicated to the issues that we're facing every day. And having an attorney that's fully dedicated and fully aware of everything, and that's their focus, I would hope to see some similarities in competency and just results, and I think it makes everybody's job easier too.
Okay. Well, I think there's kind of general consensus that as part of the budgeting process, we have to consider that as an alternative.
I'll gather information for you all, so you can make an informed decision.
All right. Anything else for Mr. Kessel? Okay, we'll move to tab 5, Public Safety, and Chief Stevak will see if you have anything to report.
President Johnson, Commissioners, Chief Rummel and I would like to take just a brief amount of time tonight and talk about the Rough Rider Days and 4th of July festivities that we just finished up with. It especially in regards to fireworks. Citizens' comments that the fire department received and citizens' complaints that the police department received. One of the things we did this year, prior to this year's festivities, is we went out on an aggressive public education campaign where we had the help of media with that to let our citizens know that the use of fireworks within city limits was prohibited by city ordinance. We had a great level of cooperation from the media in that respect. And for the first time ever, the fireworks vendors fell under the requirements of the fire code, and we were able to inspect the vendors. We asked all the vendors to post signs stating that the use of fireworks within city limits was prohibited. Even with those efforts, however, there was a considerable amount of fireworks that were discharged within city limits. We want to let the citizens know that those that came forward and made comments to us and those that complained, and Chief Rummel will touch a little bit on that here in just a second, that you have been heard, and we're looking at how we could possibly do things differently than how we do them today in addressing the situation of fireworks over the 4th of July festivities. Chief Rummel?
Thank you. The police department did receive numerous complaints from June 15th to July 7th. Actually, we received 88 complaints of fireworks being shot off in the city limits. Many of those over the 4th of July were not even documented, though, so that number is much higher than the actual 88. And I know there were some complaints received by commission. I did receive a letter myself, or a copy of a letter. And on that particular, on the 4th of July night, our office received a major complaint that required all the resources of not only our officers, but the SWAT team. And that lasted a duration of over 4 hours. So during that period of time, the 4th of July night, when there were lots of complaints of fireworks, the police department wasn't able to respond, nor were the dispatchers write down these complaints. They just informed the public that we were not able to respond to them at this time. And that was unfortunate. And so there were numerous complaints. What my officers saw were families together, blocks or a group, like block parties together, shooting off fireworks. And it's very hard for us to enforce that type of activity. Because in order for us to enforce it, we have to, of course, get the person that's firing the fireworks off. And when a group of people like that, it's very hard to go into them and find out who's actually firing them. So it was a difficult process, but we, like Chief Silak said earlier, we did hear them, we did answer a number of them, but we were not able to enforce like we would like to have.
Your significant event was not related to fireworks. It was a unrelated event, but it was a serious event.
It was a very serious event. It was a barricaded subject, armed.
Took the SWAT team out and...
Yes, and
everybody else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that unfortunately left just 1 or 2 officers to patrol the rest and answer other calls. So.
Did you have other activity going on that night since the 4th of July? I mean, any domestic calls or bar fights, those types of activities that...
I'm not sure of those.
Okay.
Over the 4th, we're usually pretty busy
Usually,
with those
yeah.
types of calls, but on that, during that particular time frame, I didn't check into that.
Okay.
So if it's hard to enforce and the compliance is difficult at best, what's your solution? Is there some kind of compromise or an all or nothing, or what would make everybody's life a little easier?
Well, one of the things I think Chief Sivak and my captains are going to do is look at the law as it's presently written and see if we can make it easier to answer these calls and probably not have to go through as many loopholes of the law to issue a citation. Maybe just a flat fee could be assessed to such a fine, or a flat fine. Part of that is, I learned long ago in one of the classes, is law enforcement only enforces that law which society wants us to enforce.
Correct.
And so it does become difficult when groups do not want it to get enforced, or don't wish for it to be enforced. The other thing we can look at is allowing certain periods of time for fireworks to be shot off. We're selling the product within city limits. People are getting the product in their hands, and so they're going to shoot it off. And so the temptation to shoot it off in city limits is there constantly. This year, I don't know why, but it just seemed like there were more fireworks being shot off. And maybe the sales were up, I'm not sure, but there were just a lot of fireworks, particularly around the area where the city fireworks are being shot off. There were just as good, the shows were pretty good around the area. That's what I heard. I wasn't there, but that's what I heard. So that tells us something.
Chief, what would you rather see? A total ban in the city and people moving out of town, and does that create a bigger problem for you, or?
I'd like to see it beyond the extraterritorial zoning. We're looking at options, and we're talking about means of maybe getting feedback somehow from the community. One of the things, the stance the fire department takes, of course, is that there's a potential for fires. We had one fireworks-related fire. It wasn't a structure fire, but we did have one. And there's a potential for physical harm, and that's happened around us, although I don't have the information and the documentation to relate to you. It can happen. The potential is there. The extreme amount of use just increases that potential. Mandan is an example for us in a community close by that allows fireworks of certain kinds within certain times on certain days. Maybe that's a way to look at this thing to get a better handle on making it acceptable across the community. Is one of the things that I think spurs this is a neighbor's unwillingness to call and to complain about their neighbor. Yet we'll hear anecdotally maybe, but we'll hear that, oh my gosh, my neighbors are shooting off fireworks till 3 in the morning, why can't you do something about it? A lot of the times we can't do anything about it, or the police department can't do anything about it unless they get that call, simply because of the amount of work that's going on, the amount of activity that's keeping all of us busy. So a lot of times without the complaint to respond to, there won't be a response. That's one of the problems. The inability or the unwillingness to call and complain is another one of the issues. Consideration for your neighbor would go a long ways towards alleviating some of what we're dealing with, I believe. The fire department's stance, if you know what, if there's a middle ground, we'll research that. I'd really like to see them out of city limits. So that's where I'm at with that. But we are going to come together, the police department and the fire department. We're going to have a couple of meetings, and we're going to research how can we maybe get some input from the community. What does the community want? What do they really want us to do? And then we'll take a look at that.
Any other comments or questions regarding fireworks? Chief Rummel?
Not about the fireworks.
But you look like you want to say something more.
One more thing that's not on the agenda. Excuse me. Once again, I stand before you wanting to announce that effective August 31st, I will be retiring as Chief of Police. I know I promised to stick around for a while longer, but because of circumstances and everything else, right now, I find it's time for me to go. And so I do appreciate the City Commission, the support I received from you guys, from the citizens. It was an, excuse me, it was an honor to serve the City of Dickinson for over 33 years. And so with that, I want to thank you and just let you know that's the only other thing on my mind.
Okay, well, Thank you, Chief Rummel. No, you stay there. They may have something to say to you. We can boss you around yet for
Yes, you
60 more
can.
days or so. Well, I want to thank you for your service to the community. You've done a commendable job, not only as Chief of Police, but, you know, in your positions prior to that, when Mr. Sund resigned as our city administrator, we asked you, right, to step in and be our interim city administrator, and you did a great job. We asked you not to tip the ship over, and you didn't. You kept us going on the proper path until we got Mr. Kessel on board, and so in every respect, I think you've done a very commendable job. You know, I understand why, you know, you wish to retire, and you have good reason to do that, and I know I, for one, thank you and wish you well.
Thank you.
I suspect we all feel the same, but I'll let them speak for themselves. So.
We all feel the same.
Definitely. You're like the Brett Favre of chief police. You keep saying, I'm going to retire, I'm not going to
You've heard that too,
retire.
huh? Yeah, you've heard that. In fact, they said, I don't believe it yet, so.
Yeah, and the thing I've always liked about you is you're the right height.
We did see eye to eye, didn't we, Mayor?
Now let's move on.
Well, Mr. Kessel, you're going to, I know you've had some advance notice of this, but you're probably have to come back a week from now and tell the commission, you know, what your plan of action is and get us a chance to discuss that with you.
President Johnson, just to let the commission know, we actually are advertising the position already. We do have several applicants actually already for the position, but it's the hiring process that I think is going to be so very important. And I do have a plan that I would like to share with you and gain your input, because this is such a strategic position within our executive team and our community. I think it bears a different style of hiring than maybe we've had in the past. And so I also want to say, though, to Mr. Rummel that, and it pains me to do this in public and on tape, but I have appreciated all that he has done for the community. And as the leadership team can surely back me up, I tease him more than I do probably any other leadership team member. Number one, because it's so easy. But number two, because he has such a great sense of humor. And I think that ability to get along with others is something that I even try to emulate. It's a special skill. It's one that comes with great practice. I think his skills as an investigator served him well in other relationships, and I also want to say thank you for your many years of service.
Okay. Anything else before we go on to Public Works and Planning? And, okay, we'll go to tab 6, and Mr. Soren, I think you have the first 3 items there, so we'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you, President Johnson. City Commission, the first item I have is the 2011 Urban Roads Project, which is 18th Avenue East from the I-94 business loop to 9th Street East. This project was bid on June 17th, and Northern Improvement was the low bid with a bid of $943,187. That is approximately $100,000 above what the engineer's estimate was for that project. In your package, you'll notice that the city's share of that is approximately $426,000, and the federal share of that $616,000. It's a little different than the 80-20 match that we typically had because of the increasing costs that we've seen with materials. When this project got capped, it got capped at $616,000, and additional dollars weren't allocated for it, which makes our share of the matching funds higher than the 20%. and that was done at the DOT. We do have several developments going on in the area. This is a good connection for those developments and to the area. With everything we're seeing, I don't believe we could reject this and get a better price for it. Therefore, I'm recommending that we award this project to Northern Improvement and move forward with it.
Was Northern the only bidder?
I believe they were the only bidder on this one, yes.
Any comments or questions for the engineer?
What kind of time frame is this one?
I believe it's an October 15th completion date?
Of this year?
Yes.
Mr. President, I'll move that we approve the bid award to Northern Improvement.
I'll second it.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion? There's no other discussion. We'll vote on the motion. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So the motion carries.
The next item is the Downtown Improvement District number 5. The Downtown Improvement District is the district that is established. This one would be for a 5-year extension to the current program that we have. The purpose of this is for the city parking lots and maintenance and upkeep in the downtown area. Currently, the annual assessment to the downtown businesses is $20,000 for this program, and we're recommending that we continue to keep it at that at the current time. Through this program, we are currently working on the development of a new parking lot, which is the capital expenditure of approximately $100,000 we're expecting, which is the one that was talked about last year next to the West Winds Consulting. We do have Highlands Engineering working on that. So projects like that are what we can accomplish with this program, along with striping, seal coats, as well as snow removal and routine maintenance. And I'm recommending that we approve the resolution creating the 5-year district, the Downtown Improvement District.
Do we have a resolution number?
Mr. President, this would be resolution number 38-2011.
Okay, you've heard the engineer's presentation and recommendation. Any comments or questions? Would there be a motion regarding this item?
I move the adoption of resolution number 38.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we will vote then. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
The next item is a resolution directing the engineer to prepare the report as to the general nature of the improvement district. It's part of the requirement for the assessment district that we have to go through, and we're recommending City Commission to approve this resolution as well.
Mr. Colling, I assume this is 39 then?
That's correct.
Mr. President, I'll move that we approve Resolution 39-2011.
I'll second it.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? No discussion, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson? Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. So item D, I think, is Mr. Cortans.
Mr. President, City Commission, this is a petition request for final plat for Saks First Subdivision. The property is located southerly of 21st Street East. The Planning Commission and city staff recommend approval of the final plat. I provided for you today an updated version of the final plat. The only change to that has been dimensions or distance requirements to utility easements in order for the developer and utility providers and city staff to be able to find them in a quicker and more accurate fashion. We also have the representative, Walt Smith from KLJ, to answer any questions as well.
Okay. Mr. Colling, is this resolution number 40?
That's correct.
All right, you've heard Mr. Corton's presentation, recommendation, questions, comments by commissioners? Would there be a motion then regarding this item?
I move the approval of resolution number 40.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote then. Mr. Frenzel.
Aye.
Mr. Altman.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Go to item E, reports.
Mr. President, I provided for you the code enforcement report for June. I'll just summarize a couple of topics for you. We are significantly ahead for commercial structures, as was mentioned earlier by Mr. Kessel. To date, we have 13 permits compared to 5 of last year. Our multifamily and row housing, you'll notice that there's a significant reduction from last year. However, this is just a point. We stop it at the end of June. Since June, the first portion of July, we've had a significant increase in multifamily and row housing, and we've issued 46 units just in the month of July. So there's always a lag time for reviews. As was mentioned earlier, we do have more time for reviews this year due to the complexity of the multifamily housing of apartment complexes, also for our commercial projects. Going down the sheet, you'll notice a significant increase also for building permit values. This year we have 30 million compared to 18.9 of last year, and that also coincides with alteration of building permits, miscellaneous permits, and then the overall fees for the city. We have a significant increase of 270,000 compared to 188,000 of last year. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Any comments or questions? Okay. The next item then?
And lastly, I wanted to update the commission subsequent to the selection of our consultant, Academus Lee and Jackson, for the comprehensive and transportation plan. City staff has been meeting with them. We are close to finalizing the scope of services. The scope of services is very detailed. That's a benefit for us to know exactly what will be part of the comprehensive plan. We'll finalize that very shortly, if not this week, and we're close to finalizing the cost for the plan as well. When we do so, we will provide that consultant contract to you for approval.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions by the commission for either the city engineer or the city planner? Okay, thank you for your reports. We'll move to item 7 then. Are there any reports by city commissioners? Not. We'll move to item 8, and that's, is there anyone from the public that wishes to address the commission? If so, step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. There's no one from the public that wishes to address the commission, so the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?